gotta hand it to the Polish army. They were crazy brave. When the Nazis rolled across the border in September of 1939 with a new kind of tactic known as the Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War, the Polish cavalry attacked the panzer tanks with everything they had. Of course, this was a contest of horses versus crawling machines of death, so it was a foregone conclusion. But you've got to admire those cavaliers who knew their fates when they saddled up, and chose to saddle up anyway. Regardless of bravery, Poland fell in 2 weeks, crushed by the Nazi war machine. The world finally tumbled once again into a world war. Adolf Hitler, being the sneaky so-and-so that he was, struck a secret deal with Joseph Stalin to keep the Soviet Union from entering the war on the Allied side, freeing the Nazis to turn their attention to France and Great Britain. France wasn't worried. They had a bigger army, bigger air force, and they had spent the years since World War I anticipating renewed German aggression and preparing for it by building the mighty Maginot Line, a line of immense fortifications on the German border. The Nazis laughed and rendered it irrelevant by swinging around it, with a quick-moving, typical blitzkrieg strike through Belgium and the Ardennes forest. This might have been more impressive if it had been almost exactly what they had done at the outset of World War I. This lightning move forces the British Army to evacuate France in a hurry at the beaches of Dunkirk, soldiers being ferried across the channel in pleasure yachts, tugboats, rowboats, and anything else that British citizens could send that could float. It led to the fall of Paris. Hitler must have been pleased. The instigators of the Treaty of Versailles crushed in a few months. France occupied, Britain in retreat. But retreat is not defeat. When the Nazi Air Force crosses the channel to pummel Britain into submission, British pilots respond with the bravery you'd expect of knights errant from long ago. In the Battle of Britain, though pilot casualties are high, the Royal Air Force keeps the Nazi war machines at bay. For Britain, Hitler unleashes a new fury. Missiles, launched from bases in Germany, rained down on England in an attack known as the Blitz. The most common is the V-1 Buzz Bomb, so known because of its noisy and distinctive ramjet engines. They pummel London, even as RAF pilots try valiantly to prevent the strikes by tipping the bombs off course. Hitler, then, in a foolish move reminiscent of Napoleon, commits the Nazi armies to an invasion of Soviet Russia, breaking his pact with Stalin. The Blitzkrieg works astoundingly well, pushing Russian forces deeper and deeper into their own country, but it also lengthens the German supply lines, and by extension, slows the fast-moving German attack down. Without speed, the Blitzkrieg stalls, and the point where the tide turns is the Soviet city of Stalingrad. The Russians throw their own unprepared, poorly armed millions into the German meat grinder, and while many thousands die, numbers start to tell. The Nazis are driven from the Eastern Front, harried by an enraged and now encouraged Soviet army. At the same time, the United States has finally jumped into the fight after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and Hitler's bizarre response of declaring war on the United States basically for no reason. That's right, he was a flaming idiot. Allied forces started to strike back, taking Germany's African and Italian territories before planning an all-out invasion of occupied France, dubbed Operation Overlord. While Hitler's Atlantic Wall was a formidable obstacle of fortifications to prevent just such an invasion, the Allies unleashed their own sneakiness, plans to attack over the widest part of the English Channel, exactly where the Germans would least suspect a possible invasion. On the early morning of June 6, 1944, Allied paratroopers were dropped over Normandy to cut German communication and supply lines and to silence German gun emplacements. The largest invasion fleet that ever sailed hit the beaches of Normandy in the morning, low-tide hours of June 6, D-Day. Heavy, desperate fighting takes place on the beaches as Allied soldiers realize there is no retreat from the sand, only an ocean behind and an enemy in front. Slowly, and with devastating loss of life, the Allied forces gained a foothold on the beaches and began to advance inland. Nazi Germany is now between giant pincers, with the Allies closing in from the west, while the Red Army closes in from the east. A last Nazi offensive, Hail Mary pass for victories, turned back at the Battle of the Bulge, where a surrounded 101st Airborne Division holds out against German attacks. Hitler is reduced to sending the Hitler Youth into battle. On July 20th, Claus von Stauffenberg, a German colonel, attempts to assassinate Hitler with a briefcase bomb. The plot fails, but the signs are there. The Reich is ending. Berlin becomes a frontline city surrounded by the Soviets. In his bunker, Hitler and his mistress commit suicide and are subsequently doused in gasoline and burned to prevent their bodies from falling into Russian hands. The Nazi Party leadership falls to Admiral Donitz, who quickly bows to the inevitable and surrenders, ending the Second World War in Europe.